Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is probably not his very best film. It'll never have the cultural purchase of Pulp Fiction, which inalterably changed the course of movie history forever. It might not even possess the prestige or maturity or depth of character of an Inglourious Basterds or a Jackie Brown, but Once Upon a Time is still my favorite Tarantino film, and by far the most interesting to me. The film is a real puzzle box, and I'm still unclear on what it wants from me. It's truly impossible to classify in traditional terms. It doesn't carry the water for any particular film or genre. It's more like a kaleidoscope, a smorgasbord. Whereas his other films are meant to be an homage to a certain type of movie that was prevalent when Tarantino grew up, Once Upon a Time is really meant as an homage to that era of Hollywood itself. Psychedelics were king back then, and its vibe is like an acid trip, containing cosmic significance in the moment that quickly fades into memory the second it's all over.
Whoa.
Like a trip, it cycles through extremely conflicting vibes in a very short span. On the one hand, it's the hangout movie to end all hangout movies. On the other, it's one of his darkest films. And it appears to be fixated on the ultimate object of late 60s, early 70s obsession, the Manson family. However, no figure throughout Once Upon a Time simultaneously embodies both the film's laid-back demeanor and its lurking sense of darkness that its most fascinating and enigmatic character, Cliff fucking Booth. For the most part, Cliff is shrouded in mystery, and we get the sense that this is the vibe that he likes to cultivate. Therefore, we don't really know much about him. We know for sure that he's one hell of a stuntman. We know he looks and acts stoic and cool at every possible opportunity.
Hey, I'm sorry about that.
Here, put these on. Don't cry in front of the Mexicans.
We know he fought in the war, and we can only surmise that he sent a lot of Nazis to hell. He reminds me of what Christian Slater's character from True Romance had to say about Sonny Chiba.
He ain't so much a good guy as he is just a bad motherfucker. I mean, he gets paid by people to fuck guys up.
Unlike the film's would-be protagonist Rick Dalton, who lives a life most would envy despite wallowing in his own alcoholic puddle of neurosis and doubt.
8 fucking whiskey, sir. I couldn't stop at fucking 3 or 4, 8!
You don't get these lines right, I'm gonna blow your fucking brains out tonight.
Cliff is a loser who lives in a trailer park, yet remains, in a way, far more enviable. He's kind of living the dream. He basically spends his days living off Rick's dime, driving around LA, and aura farming. He possesses an insane amount of self-assuredness and swagger, the type that truly went away with the rise of complicated yet sensitive anti-heroes like James Dean and Marlon Brando. If anything, he's a hell of a lot more like Steve McQueen.
Was it true you almost got the McQueen part in The Great Escape?
Tunnel man, engineer,
Flyer.
I suppose what's called in the American Army a hotshot pilot.
The last remaining relic of the strong, silent type, the staple of the old Hollywood that went the way of the dodo bird. McQueen was a friend of Sharon Tate's, and he's mentioned multiple times throughout the film and played to eerie perfection by Damian Lewis. I don't think this is a coincidence. In short, Cliff's a throwback. The central joke of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I think, is that while the film is billed to you as the Rick Dalton story, and much of the film centers around his rather petty and shallow attempts to remain relevant,
Rick fucking Dalton.
The real star of the show was Cliff Booth. After all, Cliff is Rick's stuntman, and we know from Death Proof that Tarantino has a great amount of reverence for stunt people and stunt work. Everybody knows that actors aren't the big, bad, tough guys they play on screen, which means that most of them use stunt doubles. Even most certified badass martial arts experts like Chiba had stuntmen. Tom Cruise and Jackie Chan are the exceptions, not the rule. For the most part, the real badasses are the men and women who actually take the fall, who actually do the big jumps. They're the ones who absorb the damage and pull off the Herculean feats that really make the magic of movie making so magical. On first viewing, Cliff seems unique among Tarantino's rogues gallery of characters. All of Tarantino's signature badasses have hang-ups of some sort. Mr. Blonde is a raging psychopath. Lewis is a hapless sociopath. Ordell is a blustery, raging narcissist. Vincent is vain, intellectually lazy, and careless. Jules takes himself way too goddamn seriously. Aldo Rain is a buffoon.
Buongiorno.
Hans Landa is, well, a Nazi. Stuntman Mike is a fucking pathetic, woman-hating loser. Both the bride and Django are so on the whole revenge kick that they miss the forest for the trees. And Dr. Schultz is frankly too good for this world, which is why he doesn't stick around in it for long.
Couldn't resist.
My point is that all of these characters have weaknesses and fatal flaws. By comparison, Cliff practically seems like a Mary Sue, as though Tarantino fell in love with his own character just a bit too much. So, what's the catch then? What's Cliff's fatal flaw? Well, I mean, you know.
Come on, man.
What? Huh.
The dude killed his fucking wife.
Right?
Come on, man. You don't believe that old shit, do you?
Yes, Rick, I do.
Or did he? Tarantino drops this bombshell on us halfway through the film, and what a bombshell it is. It's an insane shift in tone, a total gut punch. It feels gross, and the worst thing about it is that the movie kinda just moves right past it. But the fact that Cliff might have killed his wife isn't really an easy one to forget, and it's supposed to linger in the back of the viewer's head for the rest of the film's runtime. What's especially jarring and uncanny regarding this revelation about Cliff is the way in which it's difficult to reconcile with the suave, easygoing badass we've been introduced to. Rick is clearly in denial about it too, because he still keeps him around.
What are you talking about? You're my stunt double. Come on now. Shit.
Rick, I'm your driver, man. I'm your gopher.
Which also sours us to Rick a little. Is Rick just being naive, or does he truly not give a shit? Is he oblivious, or is he apathetic and kind of monstrous himself? Needless to say, it completely turns the movie on its head. It's at this moment that the darkness begins to creep into the film's laid-back vibe. What's even stranger is the method that Tarantino employs to deliver this grisly piece of information. This little tidbit is given to us somewhat unreliably in what appears to be a flashback within a flashback, a cardinal sin of storytelling. It's within this double flashback that Tarantino gives us this lone snapshot of Cliff's ill-fated, unhappy marriage. We witness Cliff getting henpecked and chewed out by his probably long-suffering wife. He cracks a beer. It hits his goggles. We notice he's holding a harpoon, which is pointed right at his wife. And that's it. Was the harpoon the murder weapon? Is all of this meant to evoke yet another alleged Hollywood murder, the mysterious drowning of Natalie Wood?
Robert Wagner and Natalie Wood? How about that? They got divorced, and they got back together.
And then she slipped off the boat and died. So how did that work out?
It was an accident.
And Christopher Walken, how do you explain that?
I don't know what he was doing on the boat.
Is this the real version of events, or is this the way that Cliff tells it to Rick and his friends? We don't know, and it cuts off too quickly to tell. This scene is one of many that some have somewhat derisively referred to as Family Guy segments.
You think that's bad? Remember the time I sang La Cucaracha for Paul McCartney? Yeah, yeah!
Cutaway gags meant to expand the lore of the movie's universe, usually narrated in some fashion by Kurt Russell's character, Randy Miller.
My car's in the shop. He gave me a ride.
That's a big fucking lie. Rick got his driver's license taken away for too many drunk driving tickets. Cliff drives him everywhere now.
This scene is the only one in which Miller actually appears, which lends the anecdote a bit of authorial weight. Here, Rick's waiting in his trailer for his guest appearance on the Green Hornet. Miller shows up to tell Rick that Cliff is no longer welcome on the set of the show, although at first he dances around the true reason why.
I got a 4-man team here, Rick. If I need more than that, I gotta get it approved. And you know, I gotta look after my dudes.
Hey.
Ever obtuse and morally vacuous, Rick doesn't take the hint. Cliff's such a cool guy after all. Why wouldn't he be welcome?
You could do anything you want to him. Shit. Throw him off a building, right? Light him on fire. Hit him with a fucking Lincoln, right? Get creative. Do whatever you want. He's just happy for the opportunity.
Rick basically has to force the answer out of Randy.
I don't dig him.
In some ways, this is the pivotal scene of the movie. It provides much needed context for Cliff that shows us who he really might be under his cool exterior, and more importantly, what he's capable of when backed into a corner. However, the interesting thing about this scene is that it might not have actually happened. Not the scene in the boat, but the scene in the trailer, the exposition. Now, how can that be? See, the revelation about Cliff and his dead wife comes halfway through the runtime, smack dab in the middle of what's often referred to as the Bruce Lee flashback. Like I said before, this sequence centers around the time in which Cliff got kicked off the set of the Green Hornet, which brought Bruce Lee to Western audiences. More crucially, it's the moment that Cliff more or less lost his career. The sequence is infamous for probably the most controversial decision in the movie. This is Tarantino's choice to have Cliff Booth fight Bruce Lee and more or less win. Many critics weren't exactly warm towards the film's portrayal of Bruce as an arrogant braggart asking to get punched in the face.
My hands are registered as lethal weapons.
And many took the literalist interpretation that Tarantino was simply power scaling in service of his own Mary Sue character, that it was a prime example of astronomical glazing. However, I've always found this criticism lazy because it fails to take three things into consideration. The first is that, for all of his amazing qualities, Bruce Lee did have a contentious relationship with stuntmen. Having essentially revolutionized the concept of mixing martial arts disciplines and effectively popularizing Kung Fu in America, Bruce Lee had a lot to brag about. However, he also, unfortunately, shares something in common with his very worst imitator, Steven Seagal.
What kind of babbling bullshit is this?
Bruce had a bad habit of actually striking and beating on stuntmen, for no other reason than to further flaunt his strength. Needless to say, this rubbed some people in the stunt community the wrong way. Therefore, it's somewhat poetic that Bruce here finds himself thrown into a car by none other than the one stuntman you really don't want to fuck with.
You know, Bruce, that guy's kind of famous.
That guy? For what?
Killed his wife and got away with it.
That guy?
Actually, this incident with Cliff is partially based on a famous anecdote. It goes like this. One day, after an especially brutal session of Bruce kicking the ever-loving shit out of his fellow stuntmen on the Green Hornet, stunt coordinator Benny Dobbins decided that enough was enough, and called in notorious stuntman Gene LaBelle to come deal with Bruce. Now, Gene LaBelle was no ordinary stuntman. He trained for over 30 years in various fighting styles, beating many masters of several martial arts and capturing over 200 trophies.
They say that Bruce Lee was a father of mixed martial arts. That bothers me. If he's the father of mixed martial arts, I'm the grandfather.
But Gene's specialty was grappling, which made it easy for him to put Bruce into a headlock, pick him up, and carry him around the set on his shoulders like a toddler.
You may have the sadistic desire to swing him around and let his feet fly.
Bruce kept yelling out, "Put me down or I'll kill you!" To which LaBelle responded, "I can't put you down, you'll kill me!" Finally, Gene relented and set Bruce down. For what it's worth, Bruce felt truly humbled by this experience, realizing that LaBelle had just exposed a major weakness in Lee's own personalized form of martial arts, Jeet Kune Do, which is that Bruce had never incorporated grappling into his fighting style before. So the pair became fast friends and began working out together. Judo Gene would go on to say that Bruce was a
wonderful man and a great martial artist.
By the way, when Gene LaBelle got a hold of Seagal over 20 years later, he squeezed Seagal so hard that he shat his pants.
The guy is a pathological liar.
I've saved many people's lives during Katrina in Louisiana.
The second thing worth noting about this sequence is that Cliff doesn't really win the fight. It's more like a draw. Bruce knocks Cliff down. Cliff knocks Bruce down. In fact, he kind of cheats. He uses the car to help him win.
It's obvious Cliff tricked him. That's how he was able to do it. He tricked them.
Oh, wow. That kind of makes more sense. It does make sense. That's it.
The bout ultimately isn't settled, and upon seeing the car, Zoe Bell kicks Cliff off the set.
Get the wardrobe off! Get your shit! And get fucked!
The third thing is that this probably isn't even how things went down to begin with. See, the popular theory surrounding this flashback is that it's not a flashback at all. The framing device for the sequence is that Cliff's gone onto Rick's roof to fix his antenna. After an amazing bout of acrobatics, Cliff scales the roof, cracks open a beer, and stares off into the distance, baking in the midday LA sun. It's the opinion of many, myself included, that this scene is Cliff's daydream. One big cope, essentially. It's Cliff telling himself that not only was Bruce Lee the reason he got kicked off the set, he even won the fight. Sort of. Nothing to be ashamed of, really. After all is said and done, all he can do is say, "Fair enough." Except, again, this is cope. Cliff didn't really get kicked off that set because he dinged up a car. Cars get demolished in movies all the time. No. Cliff got kicked off the set because he killed his wife. The director didn't know he was hired, and she already hated him.
What's up, Randy, is that your loser asshole wife-killing buddy boy here was beating the shit out of Bruce. What?
In fact, there's a very solid chance that he would have been fired on the spot once she noticed him for the first time. No, the car was just the straw that broke the camel's back. Now, the real question's this. Does Cliff actually realize all this? Because let's return to that scene with Rick and Randy in the trailer. If this is all Cliff's memory, then how does he know what went down in that trailer if he wasn't actually there to witness it? Sure, he's sitting outside the trailer, but there's no way he could actually hear everything they were saying on the inside with genuine clarity. This fact is probably the biggest dent in the theory that this is Cliff's daydream, and would seem to suggest that there is a sort of objective authorial nature to this sequence of events. The fact that the narrator is present heightens this argument, except most of Kurt Russell's interjections throughout the film involve stuff that his character is unlikely to have ever known.
Not only that, it was later reported that it was the hottest night of the year, and it made her feel especially pregnant in all the worst ways.
In fact, Randy Miller isn't even technically the narrator. Kurt Russell was actually billed as both Randy Miller and the narrator. So who is the narrator? Is Cliff perhaps imagining narration in Miller's voice to help tell the audience his side of the story? Or is this all just sloppy and haphazard storytelling, which was my first impression? Either way, in hindsight, upon repeat viewings, I think it's supposed to be somewhat confusing, and it's Tarantino's way of flirting with the hazy unreality of the period. Maybe we aren't supposed to take any of the film's events as purely objective, but as a tall tale, a fairy tale even. But I like to think that the Bruce Lee flashback and the accompanying flashback regarding Cliff's wife buried within it aren't some exercise in formalism, but in psychology. I choose to believe that this is all part of Cliff's daydream, that the events in the trailer are Cliff's subconscious speaking to him, as if to say, for as many excuses as you'd like to make, you didn't get kicked off that movie because you're cooler than Bruce Lee. You got kicked off the movie because you're a piece of shit who killed his wife. For what it's worth, it doesn't really seem to bother Cliff that much if this is in fact the case. He doesn't shed a tear. Maybe this is the true reason he says fair enough. He knows he's a piece of shit. He's at peace with it. He's even embraced it. But at the end of the day, this video isn't exclusively about the Bruce Lee flashback. The Bruce Lee flashback is just a jumping off point, a lens in which to watch the rest of the film through. It's the scene that symbolizes what I think the film is actually about, which is the process of self-mythologizing. The little stories we tell ourselves to make sense of our past and to make it all seem worth it. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was billed as a film about Hollywood in the time leading up to the Manson family murders, and foreknowledge of the events of August 1969 are front and center in any spectator's first viewing of the film. That is, if you know about them. From the very moment that Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski are introduced, you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. You assume that good old Rick and Cliff are going to be present as spectators, there to witness the atrocity but ultimately powerless to stop it. After seeing Tarantino change history in Inglourious Basterds and Django Unchained, I thought surely he wouldn't do it again, would he? In fact, it never even occurred to me. But when the climactic finale comes around and Cliff smashing Patricia Krenwinkel's face into a phone while a dickless Tex Avery writhes in pain on the floor and Susan Atkins is set ablaze by a fucking flamethrower, Tarantino proved that yes, he was far more than capable of doing it all again. At first, I was a little disappointed by what the film seemed to suggest with this ending. It all felt kind of reactionary to me, this flippancy and unrepentant savagery it held towards these admittedly savage people. The way in which the word hippie was always followed with the epithet of fucking hippie.
Bunch of goddamn fucking hippies.
The way the film seemed to suggest that by wiping out the original sin that killed the old Hollywood, that the Rick Daltons of the world got to maintain relevance, that the good times never truly ended. And then I watched the movie again, this time with the foreknowledge of Cliff's inner darkness and warped sensibility. And then I watched it again, and again, and then I watched it a fifth time. And with each successive iteration, this explosion of violence felt less and less cathartic and more disturbing and truly unnerving. In her collection of short stories, rather aptly called The White Album, named for the Beatles record that Manson worshipped like scripture, Joan Didion had this to say about the period. Many people I know in Los Angeles believe that the 60s ended abruptly on August 9, 1969. At the exact moment, word of the murders on Cielo Drive traveled like brush fire through the community. And, in a sense, this is true. The tension broke that day. The paranoia was fulfilled.
He come to me with money in his hand. He offered me. I didn't ask him. I was knocking somebody's door down. I was running from that. When I got out, I was in that. I was already through that. I had that. I had the studio. I went to the studio. I went to Fox Studio. I had it all. I looked around and I said, this is an even bigger jail than I just got out of. I'm not trying to take my time going to work. I got a motorcycle and a sleeping bag. And 10 or 15 girls. What the hell I want to go off into and go to work for? Work for what? Money? I got all the money in the world. I'm the king, man. I run the underworld, guy. I decide who does what and where they do it at. What am I gonna go around and act like I'm some teeny bopper somewhere for somebody else's money? I make the money, man. I roll the nickels. The game is mine. I deal the cards.
The Manson murders are so iconic and notorious not only because they've taken on the proportion of myth, but because they were crimes that were intellectualized, reframed, and self-mythologized in real time, especially by its major players. The best example is prosecutor Vincent Bugliosi, whose entire case hinged on what he called the helter-skelter theory. So the theory goes, Manson believed that the Beatles were sending him coded messages through the White Album so that he could become a prophet for the impending apocalypse, which would take the form of a race war between white and black people called helter-skelter. According to Bugliosi, Manson's goal was to kickstart the race war by killing Sharon Tate and blaming it on the Black Panthers. Then, once black people won the war, Manson, being the condescending racist that he was, would come out of hiding in the desert and rule them like a god. This was the accepted story for years, but in actuality it was an insanely harebrained, albeit successful, lie made up by Bugliosi to not only win his case, but later sell his book, which he called Helter Skelter.
No Cielo Drive for Bigfoot. No TV movie rights or book deals for Bigfoot.
And then there's Charlie Manson himself.
Tell me in a sentence who you are.
Nobody. I'm a boxcar and a jug of wine. And a straight racer if you get too close to me.
Putting on a show for the cameras, playing a sort of demonic shaman to both feign insanity and, above all, to gain the attention and notoriety he so craved. Because he always wanted to be a famous rock star, Manson now got to be the cultural icon he always openly longed to be, positively reveling in his new role as America's real-life boogeyman. Fun fact, Paul McCartney maintains to this day that Helter Skelter is what British people call a particular roller coaster, but none of that matters now. The lie stuck, and that lie became the story. We all do this. We tell stories about ourselves. We keep on telling them until we actually believe them, until they become much realer than the truth itself. And then the public follows suit. From the very first scene we're briefly introduced to Charlie Manson, we're led to believe that he's the monster waiting in the wings. But the ending suggests that maybe the monster is actually none other than Cliff Booth. The reason I choose to believe that Cliff killed his wife on that boat is because I believe it recontextualizes the film for the better. He was always capable of this. One can only imagine the savagery he was capable of in the war. He's more than just a psycho killer on par with the Manson family. They're positively no match for his brutality. The film highlights the fact that despite the grisly details of the real-life murder, the Manson family were ultimately a bunch of impressionable and possibly brainwashed kids who didn't pick on people their own size. Led by a messianic charlatan manlet who never even actually killed anyone and was probably too impotent to even do so.
Are you guilty of any murders? Are you guilty of plotting any murders?
I killed a chicken once.
Any human beings?
No.
When faced with a real sicko like Cliff Booth, they're small fries.
You are... I'm the devil, and I'm here to do the devil's business. No, I was dumber than that.
But I'd like to offer an alternate theory. One that stipulates that maybe this savagely violent ending never happened in the first place. You can say a lot of bad things about Cliff Booth, but you can't say he doesn't have an active imagination. He seems to be able to hold his own in discussions on aesthetics.
Greatest action director, underrated guy of all time.
His drink of choice is nothing if not creative. If he's capable in his own mind of taking on none other than Bruce fucking Lee, then what chance do a bunch of strung out hippies have against a goddamn war hero? The Bruce Lee flashback isn't just important because it recontextualizes Cliff Booth's character. It's important because it potentially recontextualizes the entire movie. That's not to say that I think the whole movie was a dream, at least no more so than any movie is a dream. I think that if the entire thing was a fantasy, it would lose its weight a bit. For instance, I do think that Cliff really saw Charlie Manson approaching the Tate house that day looking for Terry Melcher, conveniently moments after Cliff reawakens from his daydream and comes to terms with his own nature on top of Rick's roof. I think Cliff really did visit the Spawn Ranch and meet Tex Avery, Squeaky Fromme, and company. But I also think it's possible that Cliff had all of this in mind when he smoked that acid-soaked cigarette and the ambulances showed up to wheel the bodies out of 150 Cielo Drive that August morning. I still think he was tripping pretty heavily when he and Rick marveled at the death of 5 innocent people, probably lounging over whiskey sours and Bloody Marys. And knowing that his personal and professional relationship with his best friend is coming to a close, maybe, in that moment, Cliff had another one of his daydreams. One in which he could step up and be the hero. Save the damsel in distress, and deal with those psychotic, dirty fucking hippies the same way he dealt with his yappy, annoying wife. Maybe, just maybe, the good times could keep rolling. It's worth noting that this is the ending we get. A lot of people probably haven't even thought of this angle, because at the end of the day, the story, the image of Cliff Booth the hero, is far more compelling and interesting than the image of Cliff and Rick solemnly shaking their heads while the bodies are carted off. Tarantino's never been shy about his love for Taxi Driver, and it's worth noting that I basically think this movie has the same ending. When Travis Bickle goes upstairs to kill all those people and save Jodie Foster from her pimp, he sits on the couch, bleeding out, and puts his hand to his head in the shape of a gun. Then the movie seems to pull a cop-out. While the film's been doing its best to portray Travis as a violent, loathsome, reactionary psychopath throughout the film, now it seems to reward him for his insanity. He saves the girl. He gets written up in the paper. His violence is not only cathartic, the film appears to validate it. Except in my opinion, and the opinions of many others, he never left that couch. He bled out all alone, and this happy ending is merely his delusional fantasy. But it is considered a fringe theory in a way. I've met many people who have never even considered this possibility. I'm no better. The only reason I ever even thought about it is because I read it somewhere. I think the message that Tarantino is trying to send here with this ending is that sometimes the truth isn't nearly as entertaining or endearing as the stories we tell ourselves. The more ambiguous the story, the more room for the imagination to run wild. The more we have the capacity to fill in the blanks with sensational or satisfying answers. The truth is, we'll never really know why Charles Manson had a woman who was 8 months pregnant butchered in her home. There are many who think that he was merely trying to scare producer Terry Melcher.
I'm looking for Terry. I'm a friend of Terry's and Dennis Wilson's.
Or that it was a drug deal gone wrong. Or that he was simply paranoid because he stabbed a black man associated with the Panthers months prior. But what's the more satisfying answer? A drug deal gone wrong could hardly be called the crime of the century, but a story that involves hippies, rock stars, cults, Nazis, the Black Panthers, an impending race war, the Book of Revelation, and the Beatles is far more likely to catch on.
Now, admittedly, this is far out and bizarre, but these murders were exceptionally strange and exceptionally bizarre also. And you're not likely to find a garden variety type of motive for murders as strange and bizarre as these. You have to realize that.
In the same way, what's more satisfying? The ending of Rick Dalton and Cliff Booth's friendship being punctuated by the event that ended the 60s and the old Hollywood is a pretty good ending, but it's kind of a downer. We love a good story, but more so than anything, we like a good ending.
The last act makes a film. You can have flaws, problems, but wow them in the end, and you've got a hit.
But sometimes a great ending is one that's open-ended, one that's up for interpretation, one that retains a certain ambiguity, a shroud of mystery, one that gives you something to return to. The reason so many people are obsessed with the Manson family is because we still have no idea why they committed those crimes. It's to the point that it's 50 years later and they're still writing books about it, like Tom O'Neill's masterful Chaos and its accompanying documentary directed by none other than Errol Morris. The man sought to prove that Manson worked for the CIA for MKUltra. And while his story is far more compelling and believable than Bugliosi's, its odds and ends still cohere into an incomplete snapshot, a Polaroid slightly out of focus. Look, I'm excited for the adventures of Cliff Booth, mostly just because any collaboration between Tarantino and David Fincher has the potential to be the stuff of legend. But I'm also a bit nervous. Because the film is supposed to take place roughly 10 years later, they're gonna have to explain in one way or another what happened with Cliff and that pesky Manson family that one fateful night. Or maybe they don't. Maybe they should treat it like that flashback on the boat and move right past it. If they do choose to play Remember When, I hope that the film approaches the Manson murders, the Bruce Lee fight, and Cliff's wife the way that Blade Runner 2049 handled the subject of Deckard possibly being a replicant, which is to introduce both sides of the argument and leave the question hanging in midair. Because sometimes, when it comes to myth-making, it's best not to shatter the illusion. Better to leave some things up to the imagination.
Fair enough.
Yep, I think that should wrap things up pretty nicely. Wait, hold on, my buddy's calling me. Yo, what's good? Oh yeah, no, funny you called, I just finished it. What? There's a novelization?